Oakley dokley, good afternoon, everyone. It is March 27th, 2025. It is a Thursday afternoon, so you know what that means. Well, it's Thursday afternoon for me. I don't know where you are watching this. We get viewers from all over the place. But it is the afternoon where I am. Before we get started today, big shout out to my local county public works department. We had a bit of a scare with our local civic infrastructure last night, and put the whole thing into maybe today a bit of a chaotic situation because of potential flooding related issues. But many thanks to the county public works tax dollars at work fixing the issue relatively quickly so we can have the show today without issue. But yesterday afternoon into the evening was a little bit sketchy, so we were running around a little bit, but we're ready to party. It's a good time. It's Thursday afternoon. It is what did I call it? The Pre-Penultimate player ranking show something. I started work on the write-up for the penultimate rankings of the year. So I had my first set in December. Now I'm going to be putting out another set, and then another set in June, probably the week before the draft or so. So what we're going to do today, obviously I'm not going to show in the data window everything that I'm obviously putting in the rankings. Subscribers will get access to it first early next week. But what we will do, I just have other data that I can show, and if you want my track data as well, we can take a look at that. But in lieu of leaking my rankings early, we talked about this a little bit on Tuesday. We might have a little bit of fun. I have a GeoGuessr ready to go. So if you wanna, talk some hockey, talk some prospects, there's lots of news in the NHL these days. We can do that, and we can get right into that. But anyway, super happy to be here. It's just me today. AJ is out doing his regular person job and making good money as opposed to what I pay him. But no, we're gonna have some fun. So yeah, we're getting into the home stretch of the draft season. There are teams that are now getting eliminated from the NHL playoffs. So if you are a fan of those teams, welcome to the show. I believe it's only San Jose, I believe, but I could be wrong. But in any case, if you're new, welcome to the show. Obviously, I track data on junior hockey performances from all around the world. Two teams have been eliminated. So if you're a Chicago or a San Jose fan, you're probably in draft mode. I also get the feeling that after last night especially, that Boston Bruins fans might start to check out what's going on, because last night I watched a bit of it and some of the highlights, and it was pretty sad. Unfortunately, and I know we talked a lot about the Bruins on Monday night, but that was a tough one. And I think David Pastrnak summed it up really well after the game, talking about how it's really tough to play in the circumstances that team finds themselves in. But in any case, here we are. So if you're a fan of these teams, welcome to the show. And yeah, if you have any questions on 2025 NHL draft players, I can answer them. Obviously, with my rankings, I won't share specifics. We're going to see if we can organize like a release show like we did with Tony the first time around, because that was a lot of fun. And I know Tony is working on his, so we'll try to organize that. But yeah, so you get me for 2 hours today. What have I been up to recently? I guess I should go through that, because when we're alone together, that's generally what we start with. So the players that I've seen since the last time I went through a list like this, and I'll try to go through it as carefully as I can so people hear it, and I don't rush through it, because I know I can do that. We started with Reese Hamilton, Kurban Limatov, Jakubis Wozniak, Harry Nancy, Milton Yastrin, Luka Radivojevic, Lyndon Lakovic, Benjamin Kindle, Braden Coots, Eric Nilsson, Brady Martin. You're sensing a bit of a pattern perhaps here if you're an avid watcher. Caleb Desnoyers, Roger McQueen, Malte Voss, Mason West, Brent Solomon, Cooper Simpson, Sean Barnhill, Daniil Prokhorov, Max Senechka, Bruno Osmanis, Anton Frondell, Victor Eklund, Michael Misa, Porter Martone, James Haggins, and finally yesterday, Billy Z, Big Bill Zonin was the last one we looked at yesterday. So if you have questions about those players, those are the ones that are freshest in my mind, and it's going to be a good time today. So yeah, we've got some fun stuff we can get into. But yeah, while people sort of file in over the first 10 or 15 minutes, let's go through what's going on in the chat. So obviously this is a Q&A. So if you have any questions with regards to my local public works department or the 2025 NHL draft, or anything in particular, perhaps a detailed analysis of the economics of the implications of some of the changes going on in Canada. We'll get my made up PhD and out of the, like every other streamer on the internet seems to have a PhD in economics out from the cabinet and blow the dust off of it and put it to work. But any case, let's get into the questions. Oh, Grav, I don't know if you're here still, but good to see you. Obviously, if you don't know Nathan Grav Murdoch, he's a very much more popular hockey YouTuber than I am, but you can check his YouTube channel out with dropping Brady Martin first overall. I will say on Brady Martin that every time I see him, I see more and more that I like. And he is now, he started the season as a guy that I didn't really see much in, but as the season has progressed and watching a bunch of other players this year, he kind of is one of the best options in that, like, I could see him being an NHL player tier of player, and I don't think he's going to be spectacular, but I think he could do it. I'll just toggle over to the data sharing here. So, like, just on the tracked side of things, like there's a lot of things here that are good, but not amazing. And I think he's going to be a guy who maybe slots in as a third or fourth line center who plays a physical style of game and maybe has some room to grow with some more skills training and development from here. And yeah, so all overall, like with Brady Martin, it's more that the physical game is there. He makes good passes a lot of the time. Like, he sees the ice pretty well, works off of his line mates really well. He creates offense for his line mates really well. But his real good numbers come on the defensive side of the puck, especially in the defensive zone and on the forecheck. That's where he kind of really shines. So if he can work on playing with the puck a little bit better, especially in transition, I think he could be a really interesting player long term. But if he goes like 8th overall, I'm not doing that. But if he's a guy who's there, in the middle of the first round, then yeah, I could easily see a team taking him and getting a player out of him. And there might be some other bigger swings that I might be a little bit of a bigger fan of. But yeah, if you want a guy who you're pretty sure is going to do stuff for an NHL team, he might be a good one. What would you think of a top line in San Jose of Macklin, Celebrini, Victor Eklund, and Yegor Chernyshov? I would not like it because those players are too good. I don't like good hockey players. This is well known now. All the guys that I like are bad. But in all seriousness, I don't know how much Celebrini and Eklund have played together this year. I honestly have not seen a tremendous amount of San Jose, at least not since the first half of the NHL season. Because those two don't actually they did play together because it was the 70 guys, right? The 70s boys, Toffoli, Eklund, and Celebrini. Let me just double check that with my trusty HockeyViz subscription. If you're not subscribed to HockeyViz and you're really into hockey, it's definitely worth doing. So Celebrini, I am curious of who he's been playing with. But, look, I think regardless, to answer your question, yeah, he's played with Eklund quite a lot recently, especially. There you go. Yeah, to answer your question, though, I thought it would be great. Those three guys would work really well off of one another. Celebrini is just a really good dual threat, offensive, do-it-all type guy up the middle. Eklund is a fantastic, skilled, pacey, board work focused guy who's now better at getting off the boards and attacking the middle. And Chernyshov is just a great finisher. Like, there's not much about Chernyshov that you can really poke a hole in offensively, at least. He's more of a maybe physical puck possession focused guy who goes to the net a little bit more, but he still does have a good playmaker's instinct. There's a lot that I like about Chernyshov as well. I think those three would be worth trying, and maybe they could complement each other pretty well. We'll see long term how that goes, but yeah, I mean, already you've got two of those guys playing together, and I could see Chernyshov being a big part of that group. I'm jealous you got one of those goofy Canadian grocery stores jerseys. I love that thing, man. I honestly, like, sometimes, look, the older I get, it's kind of funny how you go slowly in a certain direction where you're like, you know what, like, you only live once, and I've always had the thought, like, what if I got hit by a bus tomorrow, right? And so I kind of live my life by that principle, right? And so it's like, with those jerseys, those Brampton Steelheads jerseys, if you haven't seen them, Google the fan-made Brampton Steelheads jerseys. I saw the auctions happening, and I went, there's got to be some guys on this team where there's only going to be one bid. Nobody really, no offense to the players, but like the demand is not very much there for a guy. And honestly, like, I didn't expect it to be Vilmer Alriksson of all people, but I just threw a bid down. So just to answer your last comment there, they were an auction. It was like a charity auction. So I just threw a bid on a few different ones. And the only one that stuck at the lowest bid was Alriksson. And so now I'm in the point in my life where I'm like, you know what? If I didn't try to get one of these because I love them so much, would I regret it? It's the same thing as this, right? Like, how often are we ever going to see Team North America ever again, right? Probably never. This group of young, fast, fun, rambunctious young hockey players who went up against the world's best and very nearly made a significant push towards winning the whole thing. And it's a cool thing. And I sort of went, you know what, this is probably never going to happen again. And I want a memento. I'm a bit of a sentimental person, not always, but when I am, I make it count. And those Steelheads jerseys, I could not let it go away. I did bid also on the Luke Misa one, which went crazy, and Adam Zadlichky, who I love, but that one also went crazy. So yeah, I love it. It's one of my most treasured, especially because of how big it is, right? Like, I could probably wear it with nothing else on and not look, maybe it would be illegal, but it would work, like it covers enough. It's huge on me because Vilmer Alriksson is about 8 inches taller than I am, 7 inches taller. That's a big kid. So yeah, but I love it. I love it so much. Who's the player in this draft that's the biggest boom or bust? The equivalent of selling your house and leveraging 10 times Tesla stock. Well, I mean, maybe LJ Mooney. Like, there's no in between with LJ Mooney, really. He's either going to be a top 6 winger who is Johnny Gaudreau incarnate, or he's going to be like a Nathan Gerbe, where it's like maybe he gets into the NHL for like a little bit because of whatever. Maybe a couple of teams give him a shot, but he's more of a top end AHL player. Like I there's no in between for LJ Mooney. I respect the way he plays so much. Like, he is so tiny, but he is hardworking. He's competitive. You can see him. He's one of the guys. I'm pretty sure. I don't have the concrete rank in front of me, but I'm pretty sure he's one of the most active physical players in the draft that I've tracked. Right? Like, so here's Brady Martin, who I would say is a very physical player. Right? So you got about 12 hits per 60, generates about 9 offensive zone turnovers per 60 minutes. Like, these are good numbers. But then you go to LJ Mooney, and they're better in a lot of ways, right? Like, he's not as involved in the defensive zone, and that makes sense. He's just so tiny. But he throws a lot of hits, and he generates a lot of offensive zone turnovers. It's crazy. And so I love how he plays. I just don't know if he's ever going to make the NHL. But if he does, I think he's looked a lot better since coming back from his injury over time. Like maybe not, amazing, but and he's got to be amazing in order to be what he is. But I don't know if he's a guy that you could snag in the late rounds because teams just don't believe in him, and you give him like 7 years to just see what he does. I don't know. Maybe there's something that could be done, but I don't know. He's the first one that comes to mind. Cole Reshny also might be a good one too. Like I love Cole Reshny a lot, but for just to mention it, he's not in my first round this year, but I love Cole Reshny because I feel like he's a guy where, based on his style of play and his natural profile, like physical profile, he's a long shot, I think. Like in terms of bona fide, high-end NHL player, but he shows so many traits that I think could work, right? It's really just that he's kind of small, he's not very quick. He's a guy who invites a lot of pressure onto himself as a player, but adapts to it really, really well and plays a resilient style of play. But he isn't that like boulder on skates, right? Like kind of like a Brady Martin is. And I feel like that's a big barrier, right? Like I don't think it's as extreme as a guy like Mooney, but I mean, if Reshny were a bit bigger or just like a step or two quicker or whatever, and a little bit more involved in play, going both directions outside the offensive zone, he could be very easily in my top 15, maybe. Like I love him, but there's mitigating factors there, I would say. I mean, Simon Wang, I would also say, is like, I don't know what the heck that guy's going to be. I mean, the hype about him seems to have really cooled down, like, a lot since he went to Oshawa. And I mean, I don't know. I felt like that was a little bit out of control, but he is extremely big and he is a pretty good skater for his size. And I mean, look, if people look at him in the OHL and go, well, that's not what we expected, like, I don't know about this, and then forget about him and it's like the 4th round or something, then I'm going, sure, like, I'll take a chance on him. He needs time. You got to be patient with him. I would leave him in college for multiple seasons and just keep getting him to get better. Like he's kind of, there's a bit of like a Anton Salayev vibe to him, where obviously Salayev was in the KHL and similar, so it's a very different context. But in terms of the benefits and the costs in their game, there's similarities there, right? Like Wang is not a bad skater, just like Salayev. Salayev was very mobile and everything. Salayev was not the most successful physical player. I'd say Wang is not quite that either. But there are similarities there, and so yeah, it's just that one is in the OHL, and showing similar deficiencies, which is a little bit problematic. But I don't know. I like him, and I wonder if people are maybe overcorrecting a little bit on where they see him now that he's in the OHL and has been there for quite a while. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, there's a few real big swings you could take that could go a number of different directions, but I think the easiest answer is LJ Mooney. Unwashed Mime, you're back and donated again. Thank you very much. Based on where the Red Wings prospect pool is at, who would your ideal player be for them around where they'll get drafted at the 9 to 11 range if you were GM? So I guess this is a good time to show you something else I can show, which is the final. I think it's final, right? Like basically the CHL season is over and I'm not expecting things to shift all that much. So let's just show, this is available for partner subscribers. 1 second. Oh, I gotta fix it. And so this is the final ordering. And again, I want to be very clear before I show this. This is just data oriented. This is just, I hate to use the word model, but this is literally just taking a look at production and all of the players all at once and doing some math on, how varied their abilities are or results have been, the value of their highest rated players and whatever. There's a lot of stuff that goes into this order, but it's not necessarily gospel. But this is the final ordering of the prospect pipelines that I keep track of over the course of the year. So you'll note, sorry about the crop on the side there, but Detroit is currently sitting 8th. Depending on who you ask, that might be offensive to Detroit Red Wings fans, but I don't really care. I'm kind of used to that at this point. But I mean, so if I'm Detroit, the thing about Detroit is that they've drafted so much over the years, and they kind of have a little bit of everything. So they have a lot of good young defensemen. They have a lot of interesting forwards. I still believe that the thing that they don't really truly have is that dynamic. Like the last time they did it, in my opinion, was Lucas Raymond, but like that really dynamic and skilled offensive juggernaut style player, right? Like they don't have that point producer, right? That guy that you can just give the puck and they create offense, and they are not, it's not this like, let's draft a guy who's sort of this 200-foot sort of contributor and who can move the puck and maybe isn't the most threatening offensive player, but it doesn't really matter. I think that's the one thing that Detroit kind of lacks. Like they drafted Brunsick Newgard last year. I don't think he's going to be a point a game guy in the NHL, right? Like he's probably a middle six winger who checks and plays hard and moves the puck okay. Nate Danielson, I've never been a huge Nate Danielson guy, especially as a top 10 pick, but he's sort of a more complementary offensive part of a team that I'm not sure is like you give him a line to run. Whereas like a Lucas Raymond is the one that I point to where I'm like, that's what you want. So in the 9 to 11 range, I mean, I can't tell you who's going to be available there, but judging by the averages here, let me just go here. So these are the average rankings of the averages of the rankings I track. And so if you're looking at 9 to 11, obviously this isn't gospel, but you're looking at like guys like Dane Wyatt, Jake O'Brien, Carter Bear, Lyndon Lakovich being available. Like Lakovich could make sense in that range for me. I really, really like Lyndon Lakovich, and I think that he would complement what the Red Wings already have really well. If a Victor Eklund falls somehow to that range, then that's like, it doesn't matter to me. You just go with it and you worry. Like he's not what I said they kind of need, but he's so good at what he does that you could deal with that. I don't know. Like, other than that, like there isn't a tremendous amount of what I said they need, right? The guy that personally that I would really think would be worth taking a chance on in the 9 to 11 range there is Cullen Potter. And I mean, they have Dylan Larkin already there, who is a fast, skilled, creative guy who has never been like a 100-point guy, all right? That's not the expectation, but he is a core member of what drives the Red Wings in the right direction when they play, right? Like the speed and the offensive ability is kind of what he has. And Cullen Potter is a guy who played center all year mostly, plays with a very similar sort of high speed, high pace, high skill, high risk style of play that I think really would benefit a team like Detroit. I imagine he'll be available in that range. I've talked to a couple of people who think he's probably gone by the middle of the first round. So that would be my target, I think. If I I mean, I wouldn't be pounding the table for him, especially if guys like Eklund are there, or by some miracle, like a Porter Martone is the guy who just slides a little bit for whatever reason. I don't think that's going to happen, but for whatever reason, those types of players might slip. That I would look in that direction. Because I think Cullen Potter has plenty of tools to make it work, and I think Detroit has a lot of tools or players around that style of player to make up for the deficiencies that are there, and I think they could all sort of synergize really well, to use a corporate term. Thoughts on Craig Button's list? Yeah. So let's take a look. Oh no, I don't want that. I'm just pulling it up now. God. Craig's list, March 29. No, not literally Craig's list. Oh my God. TSN and their SEO, baby. All right, there it is. So, I mean, yeah, look, I say this about Craig Button all the time. Super, super nice guy. Super nice guy. And not a bad word to say about him, even if I disagree with his takes. And I have tons of respect for anybody who throws out takes and things that are out of the norm and make people go, to co-opt a conspiracy theory trend, the things that make you go, his video or his rankings are kind of like that sometimes. And I mean, look, I think that Craig often has insights from behind the curtain that I think a lot of people don't. I think him and Corey Bronman are like that. And they kind of factor that in a little bit, because I've also heard that a guy like James Haggins might be a little bit down on him, and I don't really know why. I just watched him and I thought he was great. I think he's a really, really impressive player. I think he's come a long way this season as well. I think if you count him out, you might be making a mistake, and I think he's really evolved in a very interesting way this year. I mean, look, I also, with Roger McQueen, he's got him at 5. I don't know everything. I'm not a insider, so to speak. I have a limited number of people who I interact with. And the understanding about Roger McQueen generally is that top 10 is an insane amount of risk to take. Like, it is the injury history there, and it's coupled with, in my opinion, how he's played when he has played this year is a bit problematic for me, and I know I'm not alone in that thought. And so I get the feeling he could be a guy that I mean, maybe there's a team out there that takes a massive, massive swing and takes a risk on him. I wouldn't, and I know I'm not alone in that. And so I think putting him ahead of guys like Hagens and, Eklund and even Danewaye, I think is pretty bold. Cole Reshney at 11, also bold. But I respect it. Again, like, I love Cole Reshney. And if you believe that he can develop and come a long way, and you really believe that, I think that's right where he belongs. He's so smart and competitive and creative and good under pressure, like things that you need. And I think that's really important. I mean, I like Ben Kindle a lot more than 21. I've kind of come to expect Jack Nesbitt just going in the first round, and I wouldn't do it, but I guess there are people out there who would. Matteo Nobert, I honestly have not seen him since October, and I never in a million years thought first round pick. So when this happens, though, I'm not sitting here calling Craig Button a doofus, but I am going to go look, because that's a thing that makes me go, where I go, all right, so let's see that, because I don't see that so much that now that maybe I see someone else saying it, I'm like everybody else, right? Like, I hear someone say a thing that I might go, whoa, what? And then I look at it myself and sort of go, okay, I very much disagree with this. Or I go, okay, that kind of makes sense, and I might co-opt this a little bit, because, whatever. As long as you attribute where it came from and like file that away, it's really, really important. Then it's all good. Eric Nilsson in the first round is, becoming a thing, and unfortunately, I was hoping people would keep sleeping on him for the whole season, but I think the cat's out of the bag on that one. Braden Coots in the second round, also listed at 6'3", which he definitely is not. That is an interesting take. I really, really like Braden Coots. I have basically him and Cole Reshney swapped. Mostly because I feel like there's a lot more projectability with a Braden Coots. I said this to someone a few days ago, but when I watched Braden Coots, it came to me pretty quickly, or pretty recently, I should say, that he gives me a lot of similar feelings to what Murat Huznadinov gave me, where it's that he's a little small, but it's the speed and the tenacity and the anticipation ability off the puck and the selfless ability to move the puck and carry it really, really well interchangeably. He does so many things that are good, but it's just, does he have the physical tools to fend off pressure in the offensive zone in the NHL and create offense in the NHL? I think the point totals are a little bit misleading with him as well. Like, his involvement in his team's offense is really, really high. I've seen him make some really high-end plays in the offensive zone as well. Like, if Braden Coots is the second guy you're drafting as a rebuilding team, you're laughing, I think. I think you're laughing. A guy like that very quickly in this draft class becomes one of the most exciting skaters available, and the combination of skating and skill, like at a high pace of play, is really impressive in this class, and I think it very quickly becomes one of the more intriguing packages available. But yeah, I would say I kind of disagree. Philippe Veilleux is one that I also jotted down that I need to take another look at, because that's another guy I haven't seen since November. It pains my soul that Button has Cullen Potter at 54, but in general, I mean, I can at least see, well, I can't necessarily see where he's coming from on some of this, but I at least respect that he's not just putting out, like, I see so many, and I do the math on this, by the way. Like, I see so many people put out lists, and I just cross-reference them to just what the average is amongst everyone combined, and everybody is the same, right? Like, everybody kind of falls into a similar pattern, which that's not very exciting, you know? Like, be bold, you know? Like, I don't know. Maybe I'm just not taking this the right way. But I know what kind of players that I love, and I know the kinds of players that are out there that if I see something I love, I keep going back and making sure that I feel that way. And that's always how I've done this. And it's just, you know, it is what it is. But yeah, for Craig, all respect to Craig Button, even if I disagree. And there's some stuff in here where I'm going, yeah, Craig, that's my boy. Like Cole Reshney at 11, I wouldn't do it, but I love it. I respect the cojones, you know? Thoughts on Mikkel Eriksson, one of the youngest players in the draft, and he's looked good. I have not seen him in a little while, but I've always felt that he's just really hard to project to high levels of play. Like, the pace of his game isn't high enough to me. He's not very good under pressure. Like, the skill level is fine, but I wouldn't say it makes up for his physical tools and frame and all of that. I think he is one of the more intriguing players that I currently don't have ranked. And I've seen a lot of them this year, just not in the recent past, because I get to this point in the season where it's like, I kind of know who I want to focus on, and I kind of have to focus on those guys the most. But Eriksson, you know, like, I'll check him out in his under 18 tournament as well. Like, he should be a very, very good player there on a Norway team that you gotta hope performs well, considering the types of talent they have on the team. So we'll see then when he's not in Sweden and playing sort of outside of that world. But yeah, I've always been a little bit cooler on Eriksson just because of his projectability. I also want Danil Ustinkov to get drafted. I tracked him at he's playing in the National League again, and he looked pretty solid there. Like, again, he is one of the youngest re-entries this year. He's one of the youngest players on the draft last year, and I'm surprised he didn't play a single game of the World Juniors, but also he is a bit of a frustrating player. I don't know. I hope, but I'm not. I hope, but I'm not. I'm not confident. Thoughts on Prokhorov? Big, skilled, shooty boy. Not the greatest passer, not the greatest puck mover, but if you give him the puck and he's got a head of steam going, and he'll try to deke through everybody, he'll get a shot on net somehow, and if he gets really teed up, he can really shoot the puck. So I don't know. I like Prokhorov, but I will be very curious. The numbers on him look really good as well. I've only done a couple of games on him, but it's about half an hour of ice time, and his numbers are really good so far. And I try to focus primarily on really good competition at that level. And so, yeah, he's been good, very good actually on paper, but I feel like he's a project to get up to NHL pace of play, and he needs to fill out a little bit, but I wouldn't want him to lose sort of the speed that he's got in his game a little bit, you know, but he's not, I don't know. I like him. My resident Russian player scout pal Dylan Griffin is not as big a fan of Prokhorov as I think I am, but I don't know. He's okay. He's good. He's very intriguing. And if he goes like 15th overall or something, I'm going, I mean, in this draft class, if your philosophy is just take a risk on who you think could be a huge upside swing rather than just go for safety, I could see why a team might go with Prokhorov, but I don't know. I wouldn't do it. He's in my second round, for the record. Which players' tracked data don't match your eye test? Desnoyers, for sure. Desnoyers is across the board really, really solid on paper. With Desnoyers, I watch him, and I said this to someone else, but like, I feel like if you took Julius Sumpf off his line, things get way more difficult. And I think things seem to just kind of fall in his lap, right? Like sloppy exit passes from opponents and bobbled pass receptions in the neutral zone that just kind of bounce into the face-off circle at the center of the ice. Like, he'll capitalize on those types of things, right? Like a lack of structure, he kind of thrives there. And in the offensive zone, I mean, look, he's a very, very smart player. I'm not criticizing the intelligence of his game. Like it's there. I can see why people like him so much, but I don't know. I just don't fully buy where he is now, right? Like top 10, some people top 5 now. If that's what you want to go for, then by all means go for it. But I don't see it the same way personally, but his data looks really, really good. Who else is on that in there? Jackson Smith also, I'd say, is another one, especially offensively. His numbers aren't amazing, but I think there's a lot more to dig into there. Milton Yastreen, I think he's got some areas where he's not awesome, and or some areas where he's really, really good that I just don't know if it works down the road, but he's an interesting player. Who else is in here? I mean, those are the biggest ones probably. I mean, Anton Frondel's data is not very good. Like at any level that he played at this year, it's not very good, but I still watch him and I can see why he could be a good NHL player. Like I think if he goes like 3rd overall or something, that might be a little bit hasty for me and you're taking a big risk, but the data for him I think is a lot less favorable to how he is as a player and where he's potentially the biggest benefit. Any thoughts on Travis? Oh, do you think Sweden is the favorite to win the U18s, even if Frondell is busy with Djurgården? Probably. I mean, Canada, it doesn't look like we'll be able to bring the best roster. The NTDP isn't really that much of a threat. I feel like Sweden is going to be the team to beat. You never know with Finland, but this year I feel like you might know. The Czechs might be pretty good. The Slovaks have some guys that I like, but I don't think they have nearly the depth to compete with a team like Sweden. So yeah, I think Sweden is the team that should, on paper, be the team that takes it, but that just doesn't happen very often. Thoughts on Travis Hayes? I don't have many. I've always felt like similar to Mikkel Eriksson. Like I feel like he's a little undersized and doesn't quite have the things I look for in a player that is small and a winger that I think could project to the next levels. But I don't mind him. Like he's an intriguing player, and I feel like he'll get drafted. But I don't know. I don't have any detailed thoughts on him though. Which 2025 draft player is the closest comparable to Bobby McMahon or Matthew Nyes? It's a good question. I mean, in terms of style of play, maybe a Victor Eklund. But maybe Eklund is closer to like Bobby McMahon, but like faster and more tenacious and a better playmaker and whatever. But similar echoes there. But with Nyes, I mean, Nyes is bigger and stronger and more of a pressure absorber, so maybe a Brady Martin with some better skills training. Yeah, maybe that or like I want to say no, I don't think him. Maybe Jack Murtagh, like long term, if you really bet. I don't know, but like in terms of style of play, maybe there's something there. Yeah, hope that helps. Cole McKinney, maybe, I don't know. Matthew Nyes, it's a pretty high bar though.
Any thoughts on Cameron Lund? He's making his NHL debut tonight for the Sharks. I like Cameron Lund. He's always been a guy that I've liked. Skilled big man who, well, he's not like the biggest guy in the world. He's not a tree, but he is pretty big, tall, and skilled. And I mean, I've always liked him. I'll definitely tune in and check it out because I've always been really curious about him and how he might be in the NHL. I don't know about like super high end NHL guy, but to get games doesn't surprise me. Like he's got a lot of skill. He's very creative. He was an impressive player that I remember from back in the day. Back in the day, that's not very long ago. Oh, okay. Sorry, I thought I was having audio issues there. My mistake. Now that you actually know who Luke Hames is, where between Jacob Quilliam and Tyler Bozak does he fall in the scale of NHL free agents? Yeah, I went and watched some Luke Hames, and Brian after the show, and I don't know. I didn't really see much there, honestly. I don't know. I feel like he's much closer to the Jacob Quillian side of things than Tyler Bozak. Why should everyone believe in Tinus Luke Koblar? Why should his nickname be Peaches because of Peach Cobbler? Yeah. So yeah, I love Tinus Koblar. I mean, he's going to be ranked on my list. I'm so amazed that Central Scouting doesn't have him ranked at all. Cause he just keeps going out and putting up results. And I just feel like he's so young. Best birthday of the year. I share a birthday with him. Best day of the year. And, he just rocks, and I feel like he could be a guy that develops really well, right? Like, what else are you looking for? He's tall, lanky, really skilled, really careful with the puck and moves the puck up the ice really well, attacks the net with the puck. He I think in my database is one of the players that is least likely to shoot from the perimeter. Like, he doesn't waste his opportunities. So for me, I think data-wise, there's a lot of headroom for him to score more than he did this season. And I feel like with a team as good as Lexand has been, he'll get better. And I don't know. I feel like with him, it's just I don't know. It's to the point where, like, with me and him, I feel like if he keeps, like, if no one really thinks about him, I feel like he's just I don't know what I'm trying to say here, honestly. Like, if he's a guy who nobody really notices still and nobody really cares about and whatever, and he slips through the NHL draft, I just go, I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm crazy, but I think this kid is for real. And the guy last year that was like for me was Ludwig Johnson, where it's like he's playing in a junior league, not the most productive guy in the world, not a particularly incredibly high level of play, and again, like, not too productive, but you watch him and you go, he's this close to like being good at this many things, and it's just not there yet, and it's going to take time, but and so that's the last one. And also I will say as well, like, since you're a Toronto guy as well, and Brian, when I had never watched Victor Johansson before Toronto drafted him, and that's the guy that Toronto drafted last year. And I said this in the recap video. That's the guy Toronto drafted, and was probably one of the only guys drafted who I had never seen before that I looked at and went, okay, that guy's interesting. Like, I can see why an NHL team would draft this guy. And he only had like 5 points last year or something, like 7 points. He wasn't a very productive player for them. But this year he's been arguably their best defenseman, one of them. And I'm glad about that. And it sort of goes in my mind of like, okay, when you watched him, he passed a lot of that checklist, right? And I'm not a Superman. I'm not superhuman. I can't watch absolutely everyone and get details about everyone. But I try. And Koblar's one guy where I'm like, all right, I see something there. I'm going to keep going back to it and keep going back to it. And I really like what he brings to the table, even if he isn't the most productive guy in the world. Why is Lakovic such a polarizing prospect? Because he's big and doesn't really throw hits, I'm assuming. Like, he's more of a finesse player who works off the puck a lot better than with it a lot of the time, but I also feel like still he's a good possession player as well. he doesn't really he doesn't play a big man's game. And I think that's what spooks people. But I watch him and I go, he's just a good, smart hockey player. Right. And we spoke to him and he came off super, super positive and really smart and sees the game really, really well and very tactically that I wasn't expecting. So for him, I see a lot of really positive things in his game that I think if you focus on the fact that you see a 6'4" kid who doesn't go to the net all that much and doesn't really throw a lot of hits and whatever, like, okay, like fair enough, but I'll capitalize on that a little bit later. Because honestly, in the other areas of the game, I don't really see a lot of issues with him. And he's a very intriguing player to me. What happened to Andrew Basha this season? Not the production one would expect. So I don't really know. I mean, part of me wonders that Medicine Hat is just a team with so many guys like Andrew Basha. It just like, if he's not getting power play time because of, overlap with guys like Gavin McKenna or Ryder Ritchie or whatever, then maybe that's... I haven't paid that much attention to Andrew Basha this year. But I mean, look, you never give up on a guy, really, unless you absolutely have to, in my opinion. And this kind of thing will happen, right? Like, you have an off season, or like Medicine Hat is just an offensive. They score a lot, right? They have guys like Gavin McKenna, and they're full of guys who are skilled and a little small and whatever. And he's part of that mix, and maybe I don't know, like just by luck of the draw, perhaps it's not there, but. I still believe. I remember seeing what I saw of him last year, and I think the gaps in his game are definitely things that will take time to get over, like the IQ and like seeing the ice, moving the puck well, processing the game, and not just sort of being this give me the puck and I'll do the rest myself guy. That's a big thing to learn. I don't really know for sure though, but I'm not giving up. Too bad Yzerman hates short people. Well. Yeah, it is too bad, but he's not the only one. Thoughts on Luke Misa's NHL ceiling? I'll tell you this. The last game I saw of Porto Martone the other day, they absolutely demolished, at least possession-wise, for large stretches of the game, the Barrie Colts. And it was Porto Martone's best game, in my opinion. It was like a pinball machine with the pinball wizard doing it, right? Like the numbers were going crazy. And I thought he looked great, but I felt like he looked so great so often because Luke Misa was centering him. Luke Misa is so aggressive and fast and tenacious and competitive, and I feel like he's doing the give and go thing a little bit better. He's not trying to do too much himself. I think his shot selection still needs to get a little bit better. He can just kind of throw stuff on net when there are options around him or whatever, especially playing with a guy as good as Porto Martone. And so, yeah, I mean, I think his ceiling, like, I love him so much as a center, but I just don't know if he has the physicality or the physical tools to make it work as a center in the NHL. But I mean, if you think outside the box and kind of go, well, maybe my wingers can patch up for that. And he's sort of the transition quarterback guy in open ice, kind of like a Berkeley Catton probably is. I mean, he's not Berkeley Catton, I'll tell you that, but he is I think Luke Misa's really good, like middle six guy. I don't think he's going to work as a traditional NHL third or fourth liner. And I feel like that might be why he slipped so far in the draft. Like teams going, well, if he's not in your top six, is he going to play? Probably not. And whatever. And they kind of talk themselves out of it. Whereas for me, I'm going, well, he's a good player and I'll take good players and hope that it comes out in the wash, and if it doesn't, so be it. But yeah, I like him a lot. As a center, potential top six, how do you rank Frondell, O'Brien, Potter, and Desnoyers, even if you consider a Desnoyers a third line center? Yeah, so yeah, I wouldn't put McQueen in that group right now. For like a potential top six center, I'd say O'Brien. Like, I like Potter more than Desnoyers, but I'm trying to be realistic here. I don't know. I mean, Potter probably isn't a third line center. If anything, he'd be a winger at that point. So I guess in that, like, I feel relatively confident Desnoyers is going to be a middle six center. I feel like on my team, Potter would be a second line center at his peak. But I think O'Brien is probably the most certain guy there, I suppose. I think Frondell plays way better as a winger. Like maybe he could be a center down the road, but I think he's played his best hockey this season when I've seen him as a winger. Yeah, so I guess my list would be based on what I've seen these days, like O'Brien, Potter, Desnoyers, Frondell, but that's no disrespect to Frondell. I just think he makes a really, really good winger. Favorite high risk, high reward prospect in the 12 to 16 range? Probably Cullen Potter if he's available. Thoughts on Zonnin's offensive game? I thought he worked very well with his line mates. Yeah, I really like Bill Zonnin. I mean, the thing about Bill Zonnin, and I think people will be surprised where I have him on my list, but the thing I love about Zonnin is that he plays a really pacey game. Like he's not waiting for the game to come to him. He's a very proactive player, which I love. I love guys who are proactive and challenge players and compete and don't try to wait for the right moment or something. Obviously it burns him a little bit, and I would love for him to be a little bit better on his feet in terms of adapting to changes in direction of play and just tracking guys down a little bit better. Like he's fast, but his skating stride is a little wonky and weird. But I do think that in terms of like, I got the puck, now I need to move it somewhere. He makes those things happen very quickly, right? He sees the game, I think, really, really well, generally, especially moving the puck up the ice, right? In the offensive zone, the numbers aren't as good for me, especially relative to a guy like Desnoyers, right? Like data-wise, Desnoyers kind of blows him out of the water. But I think when it comes to the NHL, a guy like Zonnin could very easily, I think, be a third-line center. Maybe a winger, right? Like he's played center this year. I think he played wing last year. And if he doesn't work out as a center, I think he could be a really, really good complementary 200-foot winger who you throw over the boards and you love to have on your team, right? Like he just plays with that vibe, and I love that a lot. I value that. So I don't know. Yeah, I the offensive game with him, I'm not sure he's going to be like a super highly productive NHL player, but with the right surroundings, maybe, I guess. Which QMJHL player drafted within the top 10 was the last to fully reach potential, not including first overall picks outside of Timo Meier? I don't know. It's a good question. I mean, there's a lot. I mean, he didn't go top 10, but there's a lot of talk about Zach Bolduc lately, but I watched a couple of games of him with the St. Louis Blues this year, and recently, I should say, I didn't see it, but you never know. I don't know. Maybe I'm not. Maybe I don't have it. But in the last like 10 years, this is the thing, right? Like the Quebec League and Quebec in general, like it's just not. I think the Quebec League's gonna get a lot better with the NCAA rules changing. Yeah, Timo Meier in 2015 definitely would be one. I mean, Pierre-Luc Dubois, when he's on, has his moments, but I would argue, has not lived up to the expectations of a top 3 pick. But neither did a guy like Puljujärvi or Juolevi or anything like that. Yeah, Nico Hischier, obviously, but there aren't really any. Now that might just be selection bias, like it might just be random chance that that's the case, but I watch a lot of hockey, and when I watch the Quebec League, I see a lot of stuff that does not happen in the NHL, like at all. Lafreniere, I would argue, should not have gone first in retrospect. Like I would take Byfield, Stützle, Raymond, Rossi, Sanderson, even like Askarov, even like he's been really good when he's played. Like, do you take a Lundell over a Lafreniere, Seth Jarvis? Like, yeah, like there's a lot of guys that I think in retrospect should have gone ahead of him. And I don't know if there's been any Q guys in the top end since. So yeah, I mean, I don't know, like, yeah, there haven't been any. Yep, none. Interesting. Never really noticed that, so good eye, but yeah. Have you seen improvements in Smith's game? He's been much more productive to finish the season. Are you talking Will Smith? Because, I mean, the answer is yes. But I mean, again, like Smith has been always a guy that you need to kind of isolate and protect and put him in a good situation and allow him to play offensively. And I think they're doing that a little more. So yeah, I mean, again, I haven't seen the Sharks in a while, but I guess I'll tune into tonight's game because Cam Lind is playing. It's gonna be fun. Adam Banach. I like Banach. I mean, he's a guy who I think, again, similar to who are we talking about earlier where people kind of overcorrected? Oh, Simon Wang. I mean, if you oh my god, now I'm thrown off because of the Smith question, because it might have been Jackson. If it was Jackson Smith, we can talk about that, but I get the feeling it's Will Smith. Getting jiggy with it. Getting more jiggy with it recently, I should say. But yeah, Banak, I think, is a guy that, I mean, I think the faults in a player like him were exposed pretty quick, and he had to adapt to that. Because the first couple of games I saw, it felt like Youngstown didn't really know what kind of role they needed to put him in. Like, he kind of bounced around positions a lot, and it was kind of weird watching him play. But I think he's gotten a lot more comfortable in the last few months. I have a game of his to track, actually. I haven't seen him in a while. But he's a good player. I think he's I think he's a risky one, but I think there's something there, like the quickness. Like the problem with him is that I think he skates hard, but he doesn't really have that escape speed. Like, he doesn't escape pressure particularly well. So his game has become a lot more off puck and sort of puck touch focused, which is fine. But I just don't see certainty there at all, right? Like, the way people were talking about him coming into the season was as if he was the future of Czech hockey, right? Like, this is why you don't really think too much about the Ivan Holinka tournament, right? Like, it's August hockey, right? Like, he was very good there, don't get me wrong, but the USHL is much more physical, it's much more intense, and I feel like that was a big adjustment for him. And I think he's gotten more comfortable. So, I don't know. But if he's a guy who falls off and goes in the 5th round or something, I think that is a perfectly reasonable swing to take. Like, if what happens to Aaron Kiviharju last year happens to Adam Banach, I have a lot more confidence in Adam Banach being worth the swing than Aaron Kiviharju. But I like both players, but like, Banach is definitely an interesting one, especially as a potential winger down the road at some point. Realistically, what do you see Jackson Smith and Radim Murtka being at the NHL level? I haven't had the chance to see either. Well, Ensign O'Brien. Jackson Smith, I love Jackson Smith, but I think both guys kind of probably end up like middle pair, solid NHL defensemen. I think Smith has a bit more projectability to him in terms of the skating ability, the skill level. I think he uses his size a little more effectively than Murtka. Murtka, though, is a very interesting mystery box. Hard, crisp exit passes, uses his reach a lot, almost to a fault, I would argue. Like, he's a big reach guy, and I feel like he needs to use his feet a little bit more to defend. He's a guy who definitely shows flashes of some really impressive offensive work. But I have him in the mid-teens, but I could easily see a team drafting a guy like Murtka really, 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 really high. And because he's so big and such an interesting case study and potentially a good development case, but is it going to be, like, to me, a thing like Radim Murtka, it's kind of similar in a way. Like, I think back to David Jiricek, right? David Jiricek, I liked a lot more than I've seen out of Murtka. And Jiricek is not perfect. He still is not, right? Like, he has not, I mean, obviously he's been fighting injury, but like, when he's played in the NHL and when he's played in the AHL, like, there are moments where you're going, oh, okay, I see why this guy is such a high-end pick. But over a 20-minute sample or something in a game, you kind of see him where he's not so good right now. And I think that with Murtka, there are things like that where you can see moments where you're like, that is really great. That was really strong and a solid thing. but the tools aren't quite as high end as Jiricek, but the shortcomings kind of are a little bit similar. I think Murtka's a little bit better at being physical along the boards than Jiricek was, but I don't know. It's a tough one for me, and I could see why a team really would love Murtka, but I'm not on that boat. More of a fantasy question, but I think it applies. Do you think a prospect's value or deployment goes up if they're traded to a more barren prospect pool like Richie did to the Islanders? I mean, yeah, it does, right? Like that's the whole. I mean, if AJ were here, he probably would say the same thing. But like fantasy, you win in fantasy hockey when it comes to deployment and knowing who's going to play on the power play and who's going to play 20 minutes a night, right? Like if your fantasy team is full of good third line players who coaches just don't trust to be in an offensive role, you're going to lose. Like even if they're good players, right? Like that's how fantasy hockey works. So yeah, I mean, I would also argue that Richie in Colorado, based on who's the depth in Colorado, probably would have been making the team at some point. But with the Islanders, yeah, there's a much clearer trajectory to a bigger offensive role with the Islanders. So yeah, I think it does change things. Could be Basha was injured. Yes, that's very true as well. Where are you on Brady Martin? Is he a poor man's version of Bo Horvat? Personally, I think he's a late first rounder. So in this class, I mean, like I see him as a third line NHL center. Like I don't think he's amazing, but I don't think he's bad. I think he projects pretty well. He is milquetoast, but not in a bad way. You know what I mean? Like I don't want to like, whatever, but he has a lot of projectable NHL potential abilities, right? Like the physicality, the resilience under pressure is top end. I hope the skills training from here is good for him. I think he needs to get more confident with the puck on his stick in the offensive zone, get to the net more, push to the net. But he is more of a perimeter wall-driven playmaker guy who works really well in the neutral zone and hits hard and plays hard and does all the things you need him to do. But in terms of upside, I just don't quite see a ton there. He's in my top 20, but barely. And I think late first round, you'd be getting an NHL player. And I think that if you get that with a late first round pick, you've done well, especially in this class. Murashov is 11-0 in the AHL. Dude is legit. Yeah, 11 games in the AHL. That's it, right? Call it. He's legit. No, I love Murashov, but I do not touch goalies. They're weird, and the NHL is very different from every other league out there. We'll see what happens, but goalie hype, I don't care, good or bad. I just can't get on the wagon because I feel like it's voodoo magic that I don't know. Carter George has to be the best. Okay, yeah. Again, and more goalies. Carter George is very good, but I don't know if any goaltending prospect out there can rightfully claim the best out there at any given time, because it's like I feel like goaltenders are like, they could have the wrong thing for breakfast like 2 days in a row and then have a terrible month, right? Like they could wake up on the wrong side of the bed 3 times in a week by accident and they're awful for a month, right? Like, I don't know. They like the thing too about goaltending too to me is like, what about the team that they're surrounded by could also make a huge difference, right? Like both personally and on the ice, right? Like it's such a mental thing, right? Like how much confidence does the goaltender have in the people in front of him? How much do they feel like they are being insulated by the guys in front of them, right? Like I don't know. And that can be very volatile, right? Like goalies continuously fall off and get better and fall off and get better and figure it out. It's just crazy. So I will not comment on anyone being better than another goaltender ever, because the only time I will do that is that if you're talking Dominik Hasek being the best that ever lived, then I will put my foot down and go, yes, best, beast. Colorado traded a first and Richie for Nelson. Do you think Calgary could have received the same haul for Nazem Kadri? I don't know. I mean, and also if I'm Calgary, like, why would you trade a guy as big as Kadri, right? Like, he's a very important part of the team, and you're pushing for the playoffs, right? Like, you're in a season where you've caught kind of lightning in a bottle, so maybe they could have gotten that kind of a package for Kadri, but why would you do that, right? Like, you just drafted like 12 times. I'm sure Calgary has a bunch of draft picks again this year. Like, let me see. Yeah, Calgary has a bunch of picks this year. So you're going to be fine. And I think Nazem Kadri is the type of player you want on your roster with a bunch of young players coming up. I mean, Toronto fans may disagree here and there, but he's a cool guy and he's a good player, and I feel like you want to keep him around. If you had to give an elevator pitch on Ben Kindle, okay, well, start the timer. Here, I'll actually do a stopwatch here. Just because. All right. We're doing an elevator pitch on Benjamin Kindle. So Benjamin Kindle has played center pretty much all season for the Calgary Hitmen and has not looked out of place whatsoever. He is a little bit small and definitely not one of the most physical players in the draft. But I think other than that, if you want a guy who sees the ice unbelievably well, who can connect play through the neutral zone, who can read play really well in the offensive zone, read play really well in the defensive zone, knock pucks down on offensive zone exits really, really well, using off-puck positioning and just timing things really, really well, with some, not the flashiest, but extremely effective playmaking ability. Like, Kindle is top percentile in so many of the metrics that I track. The only and he's very low in the percentiles in the physical areas of the game. But for me, I think he has all the brains, all the smarts, all the skill, and all he gets it. He has all of that in so many spades that I would be very, very confident in drafting him and putting him in my lineup somewhere. That's 57 seconds. I love Ben Kindle. I think he's great. Or could be great, I should say. Does Montreal pick using their two mid first rounders this year? I mean, Montreal has drafted so much in the last few years, and they are a team that is, I would say, within a stone's throw of the playoffs. And if you're in that position and something comes down the pipe with a first round pick that you can capitalize on, that is a found asset that you don't have to develop, I would probably do it. Like, I said this a few shows ago, but like, I see it almost as like an indictment of your scouting staff. If you are a team that has drafted so much over the last 3 to 5 years and you're still in a position where you're going, yeah, but we still need to draft more. Like, we still need more. And we're not there yet, but we have 50 guys in the stable, but we're not quite there yet. And if we, and it's like, but the guys that you drafted at the beginning of that rebuild, when things were kind of going off the rails a little bit, if they're already getting into their like prime years, 23, 24, 25, like, the clock starts ticking real fast, right? Like, the Ottawa Senators, Brady Tkachuk is what, 20, 25 now? Something like that. Like, that's not old, but hitting your playoff potential window when the earliest players you picked up in a rebuild are in their mid-20s, like, the window is that, like, you've got to start winning like that. Because also you get to the point where it's like, if you're Brady Tkachuk and you've lost every single season, you've missed the playoffs and missed the playoffs and missed the playoffs, like, it's impossible to not look at that and go, why am I here? What am I do? I've spent so many years here. Why am I here? So if you're Montreal, I'm not saying that's the case with a guy like Cole Caulfield or Nick Suzuki or something, but I'm basically making the argument that if nothing comes across the desk that you like and you're not making your team better today, then yes, I think you could get some decent players in the first round this year with those picks. But if I move those picks, and maybe not for a risky reclamation project like a Kirby Doc or something, and there's someone who another team just wants to dump or something, and I'm there to sort of help them out, then yeah, I would look at it. Why not? It just depends on the deal. McKenna better than Bedard in the WHL. They're different, like two different sides of a coin. And it's also way harder with Bedard because he literally had nothing around him. McKenna has toys to play with. Bedard was a Dollarama. He had Dollarama toys a lot of the time on that team. It was not pretty, and he had to do pretty much everything himself. And I did not think that was particularly good for him. But yes, so it's kind of a hard question to answer because McKenna, he's got much better surroundings. So it depends on what you mean by better, which is one of my least favorite words out there. Better. What is better? What's good? You know, if you can't define what good is, then how can you compare what a good thing is next to another good thing, right? Like, obviously I'm not picking on you, but I'm just saying, like, it's a hard question to answer. Harder than it first seems. What do you think about Jackson Lacomb's offensive explosion over the last month or so? Honestly, I have not seen the Ducks much at all. But I mean, he's a very, very good passer in the NHL. That's the thing I picked up on. He moves the puck really, really well. He's a very mobile skater as well. That opens up a lot of options. So yeah, it's good. But I honestly can't give you a detailed breakdown of Jackson Lacombe. What do you think of Shane Wright this year, and what do you project his ceiling to be? I love Shane Wright. I mean, Shane Wright, like, this is why, again, it's why you don't, like, it's why when if there is a teenager who is not living up to your personal expectations of something, like, shut up. Like, shut up and touch grass, right? Like, the way people were talking about him was as if he was like a basket case who was never going to be anything because he looked at people funny when he was drafted by Seattle, right? Like, okay, cool. But the good thing about Seattle, even though Seattle is, again, kind of not, you know, they're in the basement of the league a little bit here and there. You know, it's not going amazingly well this season, but there are reasons for that. But they have drafted extremely well, and they have a lot of, AJ and I talk about it all the time, they have a lot of B-level guys. So that gives them the flexibility to look at a guy like Shane Wright and go, you're not quite ready for that role yet, so we'll keep you in the AHL, let you go, keep you going, and we'll go from there. And with Shane Wright, like, it became pretty apparent pretty quickly, like, this season, that he looks a lot more comfortable with the flow of an NHL game. Like, that's the big thing that I picked up on. Like, his scoring has kind of tailed off a bit. He's on pace for 45-ish points this year, which is a pretty good season, albeit, you know, and he's only 21. He just turned 21, right? Like, let's keep that in perspective, right? Like, he barely can drink in Seattle. He can barely drink alcohol in Seattle, which is pretty incredible when you think about it, considering how much has been said about him over the years. So he's still a kid. And I feel as though he is coming along really well. Like, he plays a style of play up the middle of the ice that I think is very, very valuable. It's just the scoring isn't quite there yet. But, you know, he might hit 20 goals this year. And if he hits 20 goals at 21 years old, like, that bodes decently well. And he's getting mid-level ice time, 14, 15, 16 minutes a night. If that goes up to 20-ish and he scores 30 goals next season, that's not bad. That's a pretty good season. And I don't think it's impossible, because I think he's looked pretty good every time I've seen Seattle this year. Did the Flames make a mistake pushing for the playoffs, considering their team isn't that great and they owe Montreal their first round if it's not top 10? No. Look, I'm the draft guy, right? Like, my work is the draft. If your NHL team is winning, win. Like, especially for a team that literally just drafted a bazillion times and will draft a bazillion times again. I'm telling you, if you're not in the top few draft picks of a draft class, the likelihood that you're getting like a game-changing level talent is so small. Like, well, not so small, but way less likely, right? Like, the draft isn't the solution to all your problems. Like, the biggest thing I always say is that if you're not in that top handful of picks, volume. Just draft a bunch of guys you like, because things level off real quick. And just because you have a bunch of picks in the first round or something doesn't guarantee success, but it does help. But whether you're picking 8th or 17th. The number of times where I've sat at the NHL draft in the last few years and gone, well, I have this guy at like 10, and he's there at 12, and he's there at 20, and he's there at 25, and he turns out to be a pretty decent player generally. I don't know, not always, but there are good players available everywhere in the draft. So to me, like, if you are an NHL team, you win. If you're winning, you win, right? I think it is athletic suicide to look at your team that is more successful than you expected and yank parts away to make them worse. Like, I think that sends arguably one of the worst messages you can to fans and the players and all of that stuff. Like, unless there is absolute obvious evidence that you are barely hanging on to being a decent team, then I guess maybe you could see it. But yeah, no, based on the vibes in Calgary and the fact that they drafted so much last year, they already have a bunch of picks this year. You just win, and where the chips fall where they may. Getting stuck in the mushy middle, I mean, maybe, but like you also, there are other ways to make your team better, right? Like, it's not being just a team that drafts in the top 10 guarantees absolutely nothing. It doesn't guarantee anything. You still have to be good at drafting guys outside the first round, but also, like, the draft isn't a guarantee of anything, really. It's just a way to add guys that you think might be good in the future. You can't predict what's going to happen with these guys, right? Like, you can try, but there's multiple ways to make your team good that isn't, like, oh, we're drafting 12th overall again, right? Like, oh, okay, maybe you get a guy who can play on your second or third line, or you get a player or a pick that you can package to get a better player up front or on your defense or whatever. Like, there's ways around it, right? Like, it's getting stuck in the mushy middle, so to speak, is like, there are ways out of that. And also, like, to me, being in the mushy middle means you're not that far off from being, you're in the middle of the pack. You're not that far off from being better, right? So you got to figure that out. So to me, I don't know, if I'm Calgary, like, the cardinal sin for me in this conversation is for Calgary to look at their team and the vibes and the way that they've played this year and go, you know what though? We want to draft more than we already are, right? Like, the 8 or 9 draft picks they have this year is like, you know what? We actually want to do worse with a guy who might be a Calder finalist in net and one of the best teams relative to expectations ever. And you know what? Look, next year, Dustin Wolf might blow out his knee or be the next Steve Mason or whatever, and the Calgary Flames win 20 games next year because they actually aren't that good, and you get your wish and you draft, I don't know, Keaton Verhoff. Okay. You got what you wanted, but now you're in the basement, and I would much rather be in the mushy middle competing for a playoff spot to win the Stanley Cup than at the bottom of the league, even though you're getting a good player in the draft, hopefully, ideally, So, yeah, again, I'm the draft person, but I also am anti-draft. I'm the draft guy, I'm anti-draft, basically, is what I'm saying. Did you see Grabenkin's comment about getting traded? The dude's a treasure. Yeah, I mean, the vibes are the Toronto Maple Leafs, man. Leave it to the Toronto Maple Leafs to be the Toronto Maple Leafs decade after decade after decade. If you want to see something crazy, go look at the Toronto Maple Leafs in 1986, I think, in the mid 80s. After they drafted Wendell Clark, and they actually won in the playoffs a few times. I think one year they beat the Chicago Blackhawks, and the Chicago Blackhawks, I think, won the President's Trophy, or were one of the best teams in the league, and Toronto upset them. The Toronto Maple Leafs upset another team one time, and that's incredible to me. And you look at the guys that were on that team, And some of them were, a lot of the good players were really young, like really young. And that fueled what made the Toronto Maple Leafs a conference finalist in the early 90s. But the guys that were on that team in the 1980s were still Toronto Maple Leafs, and there was still some level of dysfunction there, right? Like with a guy, I can't remember, Miroslav Freiser, I think was his name, Czech guy who came over to play for Toronto and was sick. Like if I saw some highlights of him somehow a while ago, and one of the most underrated Toronto Maple Leafs of all time. And if you read about him, the Toronto Maple Leafs treated him like garbage. Like he was great right away and he loved it and everyone loved him. And then the organization kind of like wanted to change how he played, or like was asking different stuff out of him. And he's just like, I don't want to deal with it. Like, what do you not like about me? I'm one of your leading scorers. And he kind of tanked a little bit and his career kind of went down the toilet. I mean, so now you have the Toronto Maple Leafs where it's like, God, they just oftentimes cannot score. Their defensemen are boring and not moving the puck super well. Well, look at the guys they've traded away. You know, they've traded a bunch of guys away. And what have they got in return to show for it? Do the Toronto Maple Leafs of 2024-25 really look like a team that can go to a Stanley Cup final? If I say no, they will. If I say no, they're gonna. But I don't know. I really don't. Unless Anthony Stolarz or Joseph Woll stands on their head and Cam Ward's their way through the playoffs, which you could argue any team that wins the Stanley Cup needs that. But in any case, the Toronto Maple Leafs, I mean, Gulbenkian, I don't think is going to be a top 6 guy, right? Like he's an energetic, physical guy with some skill that can probably round out your bottom 6. So good, cool. But yeah, I mean, like to me, the big problem I see with Toronto, and I live here, I see the Leafs the most. I go to games with AJ, and I watch other teams play. And the thing that I think is lacking, and maybe I'm just not seeing it the right way, but when I watch other teams, there is a level of like joy and fun to him, there's a level of fun and joy to those other teams when they score a goal, for example, or whatever, that I feel like Toronto just doesn't have and has not had for a long time. Like they don't play like they love each other, which I feel like a good team, and you can make the argument like, well, if you show too much emotion in Toronto, Jim Bob in Bowmanville is going to call into Nick Kiprios' radio show going, I don't like how these Leafs smile and laugh all the time when they win 6-0 and showboat against their opponents. It's like, you're going to get that maybe, but like, I don't know. You watch other teams and it seems like they're having so much more fun. And Gulbenkian was like part of that vibe. And they torpedoed him for Scott Laughton, who, I don't know. We don't need to talk about Scott Laughton all that much. Anyway, but yes, I love Gulbenkian. Again, like that's a big part too of the draft that I don't get as much of, but I would value in the process if I worked with a team, like the vibes of the player. Like I think the way the player is as a person and how you want your organization to be, like they need to gel with the group. I'm overthinking it. I don't know, maybe, but they lose in the playoffs a lot. they have some unbelievable players on the team, and they're losing in the playoffs every year for some reason. And I have to think it's a little bit psychological or something. Anyway, oh my goodness, $100 donation. How did I not see this? Thank you so much again. Like, God, we got Elon Musk in the chat. Alexander Nikishin, do you think he'll be a great, overrated, or what? I hear a lot of Canes fans think he's the second coming of whoever, insert famous defenseman. Who among the Canes' other prospects do you think have the potential to pan out? Well, yeah, so let's take a look at the Canes. So the Carolina Hurricanes, where are you? So they're around the middle. So with Nikishin, I went and looked at another game of his maybe a week and a half ago. I mean, I think Nikishin is fine. Like, he's gonna be an NHL player. Like, I would be very surprised if Nick Keeshan doesn't stick in the NHL, but he kind of strikes me as maybe you put him on the power play as a shooting threat, but more of a 200-foot rangy big guy. The KHL is not particularly projectable to the NHL as much as it used to be, I don't think, just since what is going on over there and the number of imports that have left the KHL in the time since 2022 has really changed the makeup of the league, and there's mathematics out there to show that the league is a little bit worse off. But I mean, I like him. I think he'll be a player, but I don't think he's like a Norris Trophy winning top pair steal of a defenseman, right? Like, I've never really seen that out of him. But in terms of other guys that they might work out, I mean, I've always really loved Scott Morrow. Like I still believe in a Jaden Perron, but he's a long-term bet. Vladimir Gradinin has had an underratedly solid season this year. He's been playing like 25 minutes a night, and whenever I watch him, he does not look out of place there at all. So if you're okay with a 5'10" defensive leaning guy who has a lot of skill and maybe not a whole lot of offensive pop to him, then Gradinin might be a guy that works out. I really like Badinka, but again, not a huge upside guy. I mean, Gleb Trikozov got injured and he's been out for a long time, but I mean, again, whenever I watch the Chicago Wolves and with him on the ice, he wasn't playing a lot, but I thought he played a lot better than his production was. I do. But yeah, I'm looking up and down this list. I don't think there's a whole lot of like certainty players here, right? Like I can't say, like, you would think that a guy like Nadeau would get there. I could see Artemonov maybe getting there. Morrow, I could see getting there. Unger Sorum, maybe, I think. I still don't know how his game projects to the NHL, but he's still very, very young too. That's another thing to remember. Jackson Blake's already there, so there's that. He's going to be off the list next year. I don't know. There's a lot of maybes out there. Didn't they get rid of Zion Niebeck? Anyway, I'll deal with that later. I forgot they drafted him. Anyway, okay. Where were we? Oh, let's go here. But yeah, I hope that answers your question. And again, my goodness, thanks for the donation. That's amazing. I will be able to buy one tomato. I'm kidding. It's a joke. I'm very thankful. Can Emmett Finney be a legit secondary scoring threat on the third line someday? I honestly have not seen enough of Emmett Finney to know one way or the other, and I would bet that most people talking about him that way haven't either. But I don't know. I mean, we'll see. I don't know. Is there enough for the Sharks prospects cupboard to abandon the rebuild mentality and start to go for it? I mean, you gotta hope, especially if they finish with the first or second pick this year. Like, if they come out with a Michael Misa or a Matthew Schaefer and they have guys like Celebrini and Eklund and Smith and, you know, guys coming down the pipe like it's the same thing as Montreal, right? Like, they've been bad for a while, drafting a lot, and you kind of hope that you take a step next year, right? Like, last year they were kind of an embarrassment, right? This year they're still bad, but they're not an embarrassment. You can see the machinations going on that push them in the right direction, right? So hopefully next year they have a season kind of like maybe what Montreal did last year into this year, where it's like they're not for sure a playoff team, but they're winning here and there, and they're coming together, and they're better than they were, and you just keep sort of rolling and developing and going, and you give your guys some time and some rope to move forward and everything. You got good development and everything. I'm hopeful that San Jose is not a team that is in the basement again next year, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. But I'm optimistic. You have to be. I think they're still not done with like rebuilding. I still, you know, they've drafted a lot of guys where I think they'll fit in just fine. But I think this draft, like with all the picks they have again, ideally, I think this is kind of when you go, all right, we've got the stable, We can see how things go from here. You have a lot of prospects that if someone becomes available and there's a move to be made, kind of the reverse Timo Meyer trade, you have the tools to do it now, right? Like you might be able to pull something off with all of your guys that adds a really important potential player for you. I don't know. Hard to say when I'm not the general manager, right? Which prospect were you hyped up the most through the years? Let's exclude Connor McDavid and Sidney Crosby. Oh man, it's a very good question. Rasmus Dahlin is a good one. I mean, I have a soft spot in my heart for Marat Kuznetsov because from the minute I first saw him play hockey, I was like, this is a good player. This is my boy. I want him on my team any day of the week and wearing a letter. But Austin Matthews might be another good one. He was so good for Zurich that year. Yeah, Dahlin for sure. Jack Hughes as well was tremendously exciting. Yeah, who else? I love Marco Rossi as well. Marco Rossi in his draft year was unbelievably good. Same with Lucas Raymond, I would also say. Lucas Raymond is up there, but of all of them, probably like Matthews and Dahlin. Yeah, Matthews, Dahlin, and Fantilli. I think I've loved every time I saw Fantilli, I got excited. Bedard too, but Bedard I had some mixed feelings about a little bit. But yeah, some good ones. Whose stock do you think in the U18s will affect positive or negative? I mean, I hope Michael Sverchek goes, and I hope he's good. He'll probably play a lot for Slovakia, and I love him to death. And I'm hoping that he has some toys to play with, like Jakub Dubravik. There's a couple of other Slovaks who have been pretty good this year as well. So maybe he has some stuff to work off of. Adam Nemec probably will be on the under-18 team. They have some good, like Tobias Tomek, I think is his name. He's another good one from Slovakia. Like they might have a sneaky, fun offensive team at this. Like they're even their defensemen, right? There might be some good ones. But yeah, I mean, it's hard to say for Canadians because they have to, be eliminated from their playoffs first. I feel like it's a decently safe bet. I don't even know who's going to be. Like maybe no, Lakovic isn't eligible. Like Murtka might be there. That could be very interesting. Like Cole Reshny maybe could be very interesting there. We'll see if Cullen Potter shows up for the States, because Cullen Potter would be a huge ad for the States if they got him. That would be crazy. If you could go to, but I will say, like, we'll see what happens, because Sweden could be very interesting. If you could go to any other pro league in the world outside the NHL to a game, which league would you choose? Probably Switzerland. Switzerland is an incredibly beautiful place. Oh, we got a super chat. I didn't even see that. I'm bad at this. Thank you so much. Again, we'll do the question after because I started answering this one, but much appreciated. If you could go to, so Switzerland. Switzerland's extremely beautiful. I've been there a couple of times and it's incredible. And I went to a game in Switzerland and it was incredible. I went to a game in Bern and their rink there is like, I wish so badly that especially NHL teams, but like put a little bit of emotion into your architectural designs inside an arena. Like it is not meant to, if you go to Switzerland and see a game in some of those rinks, it comes off, you go, hockey arenas are not meant to be aluminum cubes with scaffolding at the top and just nothing else and concrete bleachers, right? Like You go to a game in Switzerland, especially, and the design inside the rink is unbelievable. It's so cool. Like there's one rink, I think it's in Davos, where they designed it so that it looked like the inside of a boat. Like there's wooden struts and everything that are holding the arena up, and I think that's just so cool. I would say the Climate Pledge Arena for Seattle is probably the closest that I've been to that's like that, where they have the glass, to look in from ground level, and the way that it's designed seems a little bit more, interesting, so to speak, of all the rinks I've been to. But yes, I'm a big Switzerland guy, and also like I like Sweden too, but in terms of the speed of it, I mean, Sweden would probably be right there too, like Sweden or Switzerland. But Switzerland, yeah, like the arenas are really cool there. The level of play is great. And I love being in Switzerland. I've been to Sweden one time, and I really liked it too. But personally, sorry to McHale Holm, by the way, but Switzerland is where I probably would go. Where were you in Jacob Battaglia's draft year? I didn't see him at all, but he's super protectable now in his draft +1. So yeah, Battaglia I had at the early second round. Was it 2024? Let me see. I don't want to lie to you, so I'm going to check. Oh, I had him in the early third. Had him in the second round in April. But yeah, so with Battaglia, like the big thing with me, and I'm reading my little write-up on him, the big thing with me was like I wanted him to sort of drop a shoulder and get to the net a little bit more, which he definitely is doing. Because I've been watching him since he was playing AAA for the Junior Canadians, and I've really, really liked him a lot. The organization I was kind of working with a little bit, I wanted him too, right? Like the Junior Canadians that year were really, really good, and Battaglia was a guy that I wanted, but he got picked too quickly. But yeah, I mean, he's a really big, skilled guy who I think might be a third line guy in the NHL. Like I think he might get there. Started really hot this season, but kind of cooled off a little bit. But yeah, like part of a really, really big group of guys last year where I was a fan of a lot of them. And he was a good one. He just had some things to work through, which he seems to be working through quicker than I expected. Oh, right. The super chat. So you're saying I should sell my house and 10 times leverage Tesla. I came here for hockey and love with the bag. Yeah. Honestly, buy the dip on everything right now. Cause things are like, if there's one thing, I mean, I'm not a finance guy entirely. I know a little bit about finance. And if there's anything I know, investors love unpredictable volatility and craziness. They love it. So buy the dip, ride it out. And if it keeps going down, keep buying. Just keep buying. At some point, your purchases will cause the price to go back up. So yeah, get rid of everything you own and leverage everything you can all the way to the moon, and put it all on ludicrously cheap and outrageously out of reach Tesla calls that you could possibly buy. That's what I would do if I were a certified financial advisor, but I am not, so that's not financial advice. You can sign up for my course for $49.99 a month in the comments, and I'll teach you how to leverage yourself to the moon and win, because winning is everything, and you want to be a winner, because if you're not a winner, you're a loser, and losers don't invest in Tesla like me. Okay. Any opinion on the Flyers' choice of firing Tortorella and how that affects prospects like Bump and Luchenko and whoever their first round pick might be? Well, I mean, I think Luchenko especially is going to be the type of guy that endears himself to any coach, honestly. With regards to the thing he said the other night, was it 2 nights ago? It was not good. The quote, and Brian Stewart sent this to me. Quote, "This falls on me. I'm not really interested in learning how to coach in this type of season where we're at right now, but I have to do a better job, so this falls on me, getting the team prepared to play the proper way until we get to the end." And he's gone 2 days later. So, like, I see what he's trying to say there, right? Like, reading that, you go, why would you say that? But like reading through it a little bit, I kind of see where he's coming from, where like Tortorella is one of the most tenured coaches in history. So at this point in his career, I mean, I could see why his brain would think the thoughts like, what am I even doing with these guys at the bottom of the standings, right? Like, I'm a Stanley Cup winning coach. I don't want to lose forever. I don't want a team that's miserable. I don't have time for this anymore. My time in my hockey career at this point probably is shortening, and this needs to be better. And then in the second part, he goes, that's on me. But in the first part, the words that you said could sound as if you're just like Tim Robinson, right? I'm done. You know, like I'm tired of this, right? Which, fair enough. You know, I get it. But when you're with the Flyers and they're pretty outwardly, they used the word rebuild in their notice about firing him. That's what you're kind of there for. And so here's what I hope, though, to answer the second part of your question. I hope, like, one of the things that I think is quote of the year type thing from the media in hockey was listening to David Carl, coach of Michigan State, I think, talking about why he might not take an NHL job if they offered one to him, where NHL teams think about finance first and results. They want results quickly, right? So getting a team to buy in to what David Carl believes is how you build a successful hockey team is a very hard sell, where, you know, David Carl wants certainty of a long term of employment, long developmental, you know, involvement, and like slow but steady growth, right? And you just keep on trimming the fat and moving up and doing all those things. But NHL teams aren't really wired like that, right? For better or worse. And so for him, that's why he's probably like, I'm happy at Michigan State, right? Like I could be here for a while. So I in my heart of hearts, I'm kind of hopeful that Danny Briere kind of thinks a little bit and goes, okay, like, we can't just go out and hire, you know, I don't know, like, who's been fired recently that's probably in the carousel to be hired, right? Like if they do their homework and go in the off season and go, let's cast a wide net and see who we want to believe in and build with, right? Like a coach that we can say, look, like, let's give you 3 to 5 years because this team is young. We're going to draft a ton and we're going to need development here, right? Like you need organizational synergy, right? From the general manager and organization itself through the team and the scouts and the development staff and the coaches, in my opinion. And it seems like that's not a super common thing. So I'm hoping that Briere kind of thinks outside the box a little bit here and goes, let's see if we can, with our young team and whatever, find a guy who feels the opposite to a John Tortorella, right? Where they're like, I have a lot of years ahead of me, hopefully, coaching, and I am a motivational person. I'm good with young players because of my youth, so to speak. It's a little bit outside the box, and we're going to take a long-term curve on this, right? Like, look at what Montreal's doing with Martin St. Louis. He had zero professional coaching experience, really, right? Like, and they just went out and got him. And it hasn't been a disaster in Montreal, right? Like, they might make the playoffs, maybe. So yeah, I mean, I think if I'm Danny Briere, like, if anything, I see why he did it. I really love John Tortorella as a coach, I think, in my opinion. I think he's the kind of guy that would really motivate me because he would call me out on my crap and get me to work my tail off. So I respect that a lot. But he is a guy who definitely, it's happened all the time. He wears out his welcome, right? Like, something happens or he says something or does something and the team just kind of goes, I don't know anymore. I think we might look somewhere else. You know, fair enough. But at the end of the day, he's a Stanley Cup winning coach and has done it a pair of times, right? So we'll see what happens. But if I'm Danny Briere, I kind of change gears a little bit and go, you know what? Let's not just hire the guy who's the only unemployed Stanley Cup winning coach we can find, right? Like, I don't know. I don't know the name or anything, but like, let's just do that, right? Like, sure. No. Like, I think that you need top down, everyone understands what you're trying to do, what type of team you're trying to build, and you have a really good motivational coach at the center of it all who can push the guys in the right direction en masse, right? Like, that's where I would go. I don't know what that means, but David Carl, man, changed my brain a little bit, or scratched an itch I didn't know I had. Yeah, that too. They could just hire Rick Tocchet when Tocchet leaves Vancouver. They could just do that too. Like Danny Briere could just hire someone he played hockey with when he was 21 years old, right? Like, I don't know. But yeah. Is Buffalo cursed? Probably. Probably. Your criteria for getting a player their jersey retired. Oh my goodness. I mean, it's really hard to answer that, right? Like, when I look at players getting their jerseys retired, it's almost like a sentimental thing, which is so hard. Like, I don't think there's a benchmark, right? But I do think that there are players that exist that fan bases adored and teams adored having so much that on paper they might not be like timeless elite offensive players, but they might, like, they deserve to be remembered forever, right? Like, the types of players where they deserve to be remembered for the rest of eternity, as long as there's a planet Earth, this is a person who has been recognized, right? So, like, obviously a guy like Patrice Bergeron in Boston it's gonna happen. But I mean, I'm thinking like other ones, right? Like, I don't know, like even a Dustin Brown in LA comes to mind, where it's like he was captain of the team, they won cups, and like he was there, but he wasn't that like elite level guy. But like, he was there for that, and he was an important part of that championship winning roster, the one that was 8th seed and won the whole thing. He was there, and he was the captain, and they won multiple cups, even though he wasn't the like first line elite high end offense center guy. Like, is that the type of player that you want to put in the rafters indefinitely? To me, kinda, yeah. The guy that's been there forever and done nothing but good things and done nothing but benefit the franchise, and the fans respect it and everything. Like, it's a very nebulous, but that's where I go, right? Like, it's not like they have to have X number of awards or X number of points or whatever. But for me, it's very case by case and like sentimental, right? Like, about like contributions from the player to the fans and the team, I think is what really matter. Yeah, the Michael Misa goal differential weekly post is definitely helping me out with the Michael Misa takes. What's your take on the CHL future expansions? I mean, I don't mind it. Penticton, I imagine, will be okay because the V's are an extremely well-entrenched franchise. So yeah. Yeah, I think it'll be good. Obviously, I mean, any expansion, we talked about this on Monday, like any expansion is probably going to be fine. It's going to be very interesting though. Like, I don't know. I've said multiple times that I think there are just too many teams in the CHL, like 60 plus teams stretched across the entire country, a country of 40 million, like that's a lot of teams, of players, right? Like, the United States Hockey League has like 12 teams in a country of 350 million. So just by selection, you're probably going to get some pretty good players in there. So for me, I mean, I don't think in the grand scheme of things, if the CHL has 60 teams and now it has 62, it's going to make that much of a difference. Like, I don't really care. I hope it works, because there have been teams in Chilliwack before and it didn't work. And We'll see what happens with Penticton. But hey, it's cool. I mean, the BCHL, God love them, they tried to make some changes that Hockey Canada desperately needed to make and were refusing to do so. And the BCHL, for a time, was looking like they were going to benefit hugely from it. And it didn't work out that way. It actually kind of blew up in their face a little bit. So we'll see how that goes for them. And losing the Penticton Vs is a huge, huge hit for them, I think. But I'm excited for what's coming. I think the CHL is going to be a little bit weird for a few years, but when things settle and pipelines get a little bit more refined and sorted out, and we get through a cycle of players, like it's kind of like when Ontario got rid of grade 13, where we used to have 13 grades in high school, or I guess 5, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13. And they got rid of 13, so there was this like weird cohort of adjustment where more kids were going to universities and there's all this weirdness going on, and then it kind of just sorted itself out. The CHL, it's probably going to be similar, and we'll see what happens. It is going to be interesting though, because the CHL is going to trend younger, right? By default, they're going to trend younger and more kids are going to leave quicker. So how many 18, 17, 16-year-olds are going to really be able to shine at that level? I'm not sure, but we'll see. If Calgary makes the playoffs, does Dustin Wolf win the Calder? Seems Calgary gets slighted being a smaller market team. Their players face bias, so I think Wolf will get slighted to Celebrini. Well, look, Macklin Celebrini is a number one center who has been great. Dustin Wolf has been extremely good. That can't be denied. Like, how many games has he played, right? Like, let's see. Like, I have Dustin Wolf on my Calder ballot personally. Like, if I had one, he'd be on it. But like, yeah, like he's played half the season, right? He's played 43 games. And I mean, I think in general, goalies are the ones held to like goaltenders were the ones are the ones I think that are held to a higher standard. Like he's been very good, right? But like a where is he like in save percentage, right? Like he is in players that have played, let's just filter out guys who have played fewer than 40 games. So it's mostly starting goaltenders, or it would be all starting goaltenders. Like we're looking at a guy who is 7th in the league in save percentage, right? Like for a rookie, that's obviously remarkable and it's really, really good. But like, I don't know, like the rookie class this year is so good. Like Celebrini has been great, especially since coming back from injury. Even Lane Hudson has been outstanding in Montreal. Like being a top pair 20 plus minute a night defenseman at 5'9" in Montreal, like it's a huge job. That's a huge job for a 20-year-old. So like, does Dustin Wolf win the Calder Trophy? I mean, if he did, I wouldn't be upset. Like I would think he's a finalist, but I think it's just such a stiff competition, and putting a goalie at number 1 on the ballot is just, I think it's not a Calgary thing. I think it's just putting a goalie at number 1 on the ballot is really tough. And also, I could be wrong. List of Calder Trophy winners. Winning the Calder Trophy as a goaltender is generally not a good thing. The last time it happened was Steve Mason. The time before was Andrew Raycroft. Nabokov won it in 2001, but he was 25. Martin Brodeur won it in 1994 at Belfort. So like the era of Calder Trophy winning goaltenders being elite long-term kind of ended at the millennium. So obviously it's only been 25 years and whatever, but if he wins it, I wouldn't be surprised. But God, man, being a number 1 center in the NHL and being a top pair defenseman in the NHL is not an easy job. And so for those guys, doing it way younger is also a huge achievement, I would say. Which jersey will be the first team Scouching jersey retired? I mean, probably Austin Matthews, because his back is going to fall apart in 5 years and he'll retire before Mitch Marner, right? Like, I mean, I'm half joking, but I I get the feeling it's probably Matthews. Like I started doing this in 2015, but I pick with Toronto's picks, and Matthews would have been mine in 2016. And yeah, he's been fantastic for Toronto, obviously. So yeah, probably him. Opinions on Igor Chernyshov and if his stats are being platooned by Misa or his play is helping to further elevate Misa. I mean, it's both. I don't think Chernyshov is as defensively effective as like a great hockey player is, but he is a guy who could be. I mean, he definitely benefits from Misa. Those two synergize extremely, extremely well together. That's for sure. I like how he plays with him, but I also think Misa, I also think he benefits Misa as well, just by being a finishing option for him. And like Misa draws a lot of attention and a lot of pressure, and Chernyshov is a really good sort of option to defer and diffuse that pressure to. So they kind of work together well. Flyers should retire 28 for Claude Giroux. Yes, they probably should. I would say Claude Giroux is a really good example of a guy they should retire. What is one thing in your high school days that high school kids now these days would find odd? Oh my God. Oh, geez. Here's the thing. Here's the thing that when I think about when I was young is I underestimate how crazy it probably is. Like the young world probably underestimates how crazy it was when I was 16, right? Like before Facebook was new, right? Like, what's the movie? There's a movie that came out when I was in high school that was huge with our generation, or at least like the boys in our generation who were, at that age. 2004. So if you go to watch the movie Eurotrip from 2004, pre-social media, everybody going to Europe for a graduation style trip that, everything, let's have our blowout European backpacking trip. It wasn't as common back then. And and so you watch that movie though, there is no cell phone with internet, right? Like they face technological problems. Like the one of the running plot lines in that movie is about one of the characters and his expensive Leica film camera, right? Like digital cameras were garbage back then, right? Like there was no social media, there was no nothing. And it's an interesting time capsule of this weird sort of like the last vestiges of everything being public, everything being, a social game. And so I would say that the time period between when, yes, rest in peace, Michelle Trachtenberg, by the way, yes, gone too soon. I think she was 39, which is crazy. But also Matt Damon is in that movie, so there's that. But yeah, like I lived through high school. I graduated in 2008. So I saw a world in high school without Facebook, and then I saw a world with Facebook. And the period from, I'd say, 2005 until like 2010 on Facebook, the things people put on that website, because your parents weren't there. The parents didn't know. For a time, I got my Facebook account. I haven't had Facebook in over a decade, but I got my Facebook account from an email invite. You couldn't register unless you got an invite. So that's number one. That's crazy. But number two, since you only could join it with an invite, there was privacy. And I think it was also like the Facebook wall wasn't even really a thing when it was really new. It was just a place to like add friends and post photos and do all this stuff. The things that were on Facebook, oh my God. I remember so clearly checking it at night and on weekends and stuff and seeing friends of mine or friends of friends posting 100 photos of a photo album on Facebook of just being completely wasted in the park. Right? Like drinking doing things that are not allowed, really, and just all over the internet, right? Like it was the Wild West. It was crazy. And I was too much of a geek and nerd to be part of that culture, but there was almost like a competitive aspect at that age amongst kids to post the craziest stuff on Facebook, to share, to basically show that you were the cool kid, right? Like all of that stuff. And then the parents got Facebook and it just went away overnight. Like it became way more like, you know, it was like Lord of the Flies for a while there. And so seeing that and then seeing it go away because privacy disappeared and became not a thing anymore, it's changed. It's very, very different now. And those early days before Facebook, like on MSN even, like I had MSN in like grade 7 or 8. Like if you don't know what MSN is, but MSN was like it was the world if you were in middle school or high school in the early to mid 2000s. Like it was the thing. And it was really just Discord basically. Like it was basically just Discord, but in 2002 and without video. I think it had video chat and audio chat, but I don't think anyone ever used it. But it was basically Discord, but 20 years before Discord was a big thing. So yeah, I mean, like that's the big thing. I would definitely say is like if you had a snapshot of what Facebook looked like if you were a 16-year-old in 2006, strap in because like there was some stuff on there that like, yep. You know, it was like kids feeling the freedom to share their craziest moments, right? Like, and do it privately, right? To only their friends. It was wild. It was a crazy time. But that's gone now, I think. I mean, obviously I'm not 15 anymore, but other than that, I mean, there's a lot, right? Like I'm at that age now where I can start doing that, where it's like, man, I remember having dial-up and the day I got broadband internet. Like I remember the day we switched it on, and if you've never used a dial-up modem to access the internet, God bless you, because those days were agonizing. Or the days of burning CDs, when burning your own CDs was a thing that hit the world. There were like compatibility issues. There were software issues. This software is not compatible with this disk type, and this disk drive isn't compatible with this disk type or this software, and this isn't this and this. Like software compatibility with hardware and just the complexity that there was sometimes with computers and software and everything in the 90s through the 2000s was unreal. It was crazy. So yeah, I mean, like seeing technology change in that matter, I would say it hasn't quite changed to the same degree in the last 10 years that it did the previous 10. Because like just that, or the previous 20, I should say, right? Like it's just pretty wild. Yeah, like when Napster was new, like Napster, I don't think people understand how insane Napster was, if you think about it, right? Like it's hard unless you're kind of my age, where you were a teenager when Napster dropped, right? Like you would go to HMV, which is a record store we had in Canada. I think it was in the States too, but it was a British company. But anyway, you would go to like wherever to buy your CDs, right? A CD could have been $25 in like 2000. So like $20 on a CD in 2000, that's probably like $35 to $40 today. Like think about that. Imagine you wanted to listen to the newest Kendrick Lamar album and you could only do it by going to a store in person or maybe buy it online and spend like half of one video game to buy it, right? And then all of a sudden someone comes along with a software program where it's like you just type in what you want and download it for free. You mean I don't have to go to the store and spend my whole allowance and then some just so I can listen to Linkin Park on my Walkman? Whoa, you know, like mind-blowing thing. And the world freaked out. Like the news went nuts. Metallica was really famous at the time at the time they were kind of ridiculed. Like there's a South Park episode making fun of them for suing Napster and like starting the procedure of the Digital Millennium and Copyright Act and all these copyright laws that protect creative things like music on the internet marketplace from just being pirated and stolen, right? Like obviously when you're a kid, everything should be pirated because screw the man and the government is bad and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, people do need to make a living, and not everybody is Metallica. Not everybody is Britney Spears, right? Like not everybody was making a bunch of money. And so if you give everything out for free, then what's the point in making it if everyone's just going to take it and put it out for free, right? in my opinion, I'm obviously now on a pedestal, but in my opinion, in the time since, I think we have completely screwed over musicians with the compromise that we made in that era, because we went from music being an investment, right? Like your CD collection was like who you were as a person. Like if you go and watch an episode of Friends from like the 90s, right? I think Joey and Chandler's apartment, they have a rack of CDs against the wall next to their TV or whatever, and like their whatever, because it was a thing where you wouldn't put your CDs in a cupboard, right? Like sometimes you did, but a lot of people had like displays of their CDs, because when people came over and like you had friends over or whatever, like your CD collection was like almost like a status symbol. It was like a capture of who you were. We don't have that anymore. But it's because you had to invest money into the music that you had access to at an arm's reach. So taking that away, fair enough, right? Like the internet changes things, whatever. But Spotify being free for so long and running at a loss for so long, like I think that's a bit of a problem with the way we've done things since, I'd say, the financial recession in the 2000s, where interest rates have been so low and debt has been so cheap to run businesses that giant corporations can undercut everyone established for really, really cheap debt and gain investors doing that and just fund things at no profit whatsoever, but keep operating. And then at the end of the day, 15 years later, they find a way to turn a profit, right? Like that works. It works when debt's really cheap, but things were never like that before 2007. So Spotify could afford, unlike if they had started 10 years prior, Spotify could afford to be cheap debt and just gain investors and sell music for free with ads. And then now you have a world where you're paying $10 or $15 per month, like $15, $20, $25 per month for all the music you could ever want. That's, compared to what I'm used to when I was a kid, that is nothing. That is pennies. And to me, that's crazy. Like, to me, if Spotify all of a sudden was like, we're $40 a month, $50 a month, because we need to pay artists more and everybody's tired of ads anyway. Yeah, I mean, it would be an investment, but it's just so jarring for me that music was such a valuable thing back in the day, and now it's a ubiquitous, everybody has access to everything kind of thing, right? And so now you have artists that are not just musicians. They have to do other business verticals, right? Like they have to do brand deals. They have to have a perfume line. They have to have this and this and this. I mean, they did back in the day too, but like now it's kind of like you kind of have to do these brand deals and partnerships and all of these things to supplement your streaming income, because you sure aren't, you're getting less from tickets. Anyway, we're getting way off topic here, but the point is, that's also something that from my youth, it's the social media thing, and the what's it called, the sort of way that we view, I guess, art, right? Like you had to invest your money into media back in the day, and now you're not. Well, you are, but not nearly as much as you used to. Have you watched any BCHL this year of the two players? Yeah, so those guys, I think you're talking about Laurent Auger and Doc. I don't see much with either of those guys, honestly. I think Laurent Auger might be an interesting college player, but we'll see. Thoughts on Kieran Walton and his NHL potential? He's a team scouching guy. I love Kieran Walton. Fun, skilled, big boy, big fan. Yeah. I love Kieran Walton. I remember. Oh, okay. Yeah, Gary Roberts' son is now in the OHL Cup. Yeah, that's pretty crazy. So is Nikolai Kulemin. I think Nikolai Kulemin's son is also playing on the Don Mills Flyers. AJ's here. What's up? Tell me why Fabian Lysell is good. He's not. The implication is that you used to buy 24 CDs a year. That can't be true. Well, I mean, Yeah, I mean, I remember going to buy like 3 CDs at a time. Like 20 CDs a year is not an unreasonable thing. And the other thing too is like $20 in 1999 or something. Like what was $20 in 20 US dollars in 1999? I mean, obviously, yeah, $38. So you know, like if you bought 1 CD a month in 2025 with modern pricing like it was in 1999, that's $38 a month. And so you get unlimited access to everything that ever existed for less than half that, or half that ish. If you have a family plan, it's even less. Like that is mind-boggling to me. I get it, but it's that's jarring to me. And movies are the same. Again, Netflix was a company that did not make money forever. They just did not make money. But they undercut Blockbuster and they undercut all the video stores out there that were selling media because they could. They had the money because they got it cheap from the recession cuts and stuff. Netflix was able to do what they did. High School Will's playlist. Oh boy. Yeah, High School Will's playlist. Ah, jeez. I'm a little bit all over the place. I think it's the ADHD that I have, but I was in the jazz band, so I was big into jazz and big into fusion, like Weather Report, and like Chick Corea and Tony Williams and Alan Holdsworth. I love Alan Holdsworth. That was my high school world. I was also big into like metal, Dream Theater, Lamb of God. Who else was big for me in those days? I was on the Linkin Park hard when they were new. Yeah, Alexis on Fire. Alexis on Fire was my freshman year musical performance that was free for the students that I went to, and they were insane. I went to McMaster University, and if you don't know who Alexis on Fire is, they are Hamilton's. Well, they were the Arkells to Hamilton before the Arkells. Like they were Hamilton's band, and they became Ontario's band in like Canada. Like Alexis on Fire rocks, and they were great. I've seen them a bunch of times. But yeah, what else? Oh, I got a visitor. Oh my god. But yeah, what else was on that playlist? I don't know. I wish I could go back and look, but I can't. I don't know. It was all kinds of stuff though. My dad, I grew up on U2. My dad was a huge U2 fan, is a huge U2 fan. I grew up on that. And then once I discovered like that all music didn't have to be crazy and complicated, like a band like Sigur Rós came across my desk in high school, and that pushed me in a bit of a different direction. Like we had, you know, what else was out there? Like God is an Astronaut is a good one up that alley. I'm not ashamed to admit that I've been a Coldplay fan since Parachutes. It's a good time. And we're seeing them live actually in Toronto later this year. It's gonna be good. Hopefully. I saw them at the Rogers Center and they were insane. What's the base salary and source of income in the scouting industry? What's your end goal? Do you have any advice? So it depends, right? Like if you're talking NHL, I'll tell you what, there was a team that I spoke to about working, and it was a part-time thing, and they were going to pay me, I won't say specifically, but it's not a salary I could live off of, and it's a part-time job. But it was not nothing. It would be very difficult to make it work as a lifestyle, I would say, but it is a thing that it's not like 10 grand, right? Like they're not paying you absolutely nothing. Like if you're working in the junior world, it's nothing. But in the NHL, like it's a decent chunk for part-time work. But that's as far as I can go. It's a salary, I would say. My end goal, I don't know. I mean, I've done this for years now. Like this is now of actually tracking data and going really deep into this. This is the 6th year of doing it. Oh my God. And I've spoken to teams, I talk to all kinds of people pretty often. And I've spoken to scouting directors too, right? Like directly about like, what do I need to do, right? and it just hasn't come together for one reason or another, right? Like I've been told a bunch of different things. And at the end of the day, like I just kind of don't really care about that so much anymore, right? Like if the, you know, I don't know, Colorado Avalanche come and call me and they're like, hey, you want to join the team? Like you want to do this and this and this, and it works for me. And I go, okay, then sure, I'll do it, right? Like that would be awesome, right? Like if I could help a team win a Stanley Cup, that would be a life. I would die happy. But if I don't, I still want to do this work, right? So with what I'm doing here on this show and long term with this, it's scalable infinitely. It can grow. I love doing this. The work-life balance for me right now is really, really great. And obviously I'm not like wealthy, right? Like, but I don't really care so much because I can make it work with doing what I'm doing. So it's good. Like it's a bit different for me than a lot of people. And I've been told that there might be a little bit of resentment from people in the industry because I do things this way and do it differently from those who are on the road 200 days a year and away from their families, and they sacrifice so much to do this job. You know, my retort to that would be like, well, I'm doing pretty much the same thing, just with a little bit of a different way and I would argue more efficiency, right? And cheaper. But that's neither here nor there. The point is, advice to get into it. I would say, I've said this a few times, I would say the best thing to do is a couple of things. Number one, really, really pay attention to an NHL hockey game and what a good NHL team looks like and what a not so good NHL team looks like. Like, why do teams lose? That isn't just goaltenders are bad or good. Like, why do teams lose? Why do teams get outshot? Why do teams outshoot other teams, right? Why? Really deconstruct the game is like a starting point, right? Like forget about the team you love, forget about the players you love, forget about everything. Just watch the numbers on the jersey going around the ice doing what they're doing and who does what and why it works and why it doesn't, right? Like that's number one. Number two, if you're going to watch junior players, I don't know if there's a good example I can think of off the top of my head, but find players that you could find footage of online who were super, super highly rated and worked, super, super highly rated and didn't work, super, super low rated and worked, and compare what those players all look like and what the commonalities might be between them, right? Because there are players that get drafted very high and don't work out. And there are players who get drafted very low and do work out, or at least very much outperform where they get drafted. So figuring out why that might be and really leaning into that is like a huge thing too, right? Like setting aside your Neanderthal hockey man brain, right? Like, okay, like we need big players. We need this. We need physical players. We need this and this and this, right? Like, no, deconstruct everything, start from scratch, watch the game, figure out what you think works the best, and like look at historical case studies of guys who have worked and haven't worked and whatever, or guys who left a team and went to another team and it really works there, and find out why, right? Like explore. And honestly, like entering the field, I mean, my experience, like you have to go to people and offer them a lot. Like you have to, I back in the day, like I sent emails to every CHL team and, even not OJHL, but like my local OJHL teams. I sent emails to them being like, hey, here's my work. Here's my name. Here's my email. Like, if you want to work together, let's chat. I'm happy to do some volunteer stuff if you want, like blah, blah, blah. It took a long time for someone to actually go, okay, like let's talk, right? So, but if you're willing, and this has been my experience, especially for early on, like if you're willing to work for nothing, and if you're willing to do a lot of work and go above and beyond for nothing, and really, you know, really put yourself out there for very little, and a big ladder ahead of you, right? Like hierarchy and experience it's very much like a Japanese business culture. Seniority, experience, and longevity are what is valued a lot of the time. So you got to be able to be willing to be putting up with that stuff. Like the number of times I've heard about people in the industry who are younger, who say, I like this player, and get laughed at by the establishment people, and then a little while later, one way or the other, that player ends up in the NHL. They go, how did we miss on this player? Like, that's the reaction. They don't go to the younger person and go, what did you see in this guy that we didn't? Like, what's the deal there? They totally forget that it even was a point of discussion, right? Like, so it's like and then the guys that they pick are the ones that may not work out, or that the young people might look at and be like, well, I guess, but I don't really know much about how this is going to work out. And they go, well, it just didn't work out. Like, if you can tolerate that and put up with that and work with that and move up and do that for a long time and go above and beyond, like, by all means, get in there, right? Like, I interviewed with a company that offered me an opportunity that I interviewed about, and what I was going to get in return from them was far, far, far below what I am looking for, right? Like, far below what I would feel like I could put up with. And that's not uncommon. So, like, everybody's bar is different. So I would recommend, like, take your time. If you really want to get into this stuff, carve out your own path, find a path that works for you and whatever your workflow might be, and just go, right? Like, open mind, deconstruct your ideas of the game, really focus, and go from there. Like, it doesn't happen overnight for everybody. Some people, it's a miracle, right? But, like, not everybody. And just, see where it goes. What was my first ever job? Construction. I actually worked in house renovations for 2 summers in high school. My dad told me I either had to wait tables or do construction. And me being me, I went, I don't want to be around people. I'm gonna do the construction thing. Now, the people I was around at the construction gig were colorful, let's say, but it was decent money. I didn't have to work for tips, and I didn't have to put up with a bunch of crap. I just got jobs and did them, and it was fine. I mean, it wasn't fun, but it was good hard work, Okay, last question of the day, and then we're going to get out of here. If I remember correctly, the guy ran the Draft Dynasty channel, got hired by the Canadians. Not sure he's still there, but I haven't seen any updates. Yeah, so he is. Yannick is still there, as far as I know. Yannick and I talked before he got hired here and there relatively often back in the day. So I wouldn't say I know him, but I've met him and spoken to him. And so, yeah, he's still there as far as I know, but I think his job there is like a support role, like I'm not 100% sure, so I don't want to like speculate too much, but I think he's like there to be sort of an auxiliary part of the staff and like more on the video side of things and like doing that as well as doing the scouting work as well. So I think he's in this kind of like weird hybrid spot, but he's still there, which is great for him, like huge for him. And AJ closing the show with colorful meaning Italian. No, that's not what I mean. I'm not referring to skin color. I'm talking personality, my friend. Imagine me, 15 years younger, sitting in a circle on a cooler, eating a sandwich with a bunch of dudes that are in their 30s or 40s, talking about their steroid cycles. That's what I'm talking about. That was weird. I also the guy running our site didn't make us wear hard hats or steel-toed boots, which I figured out later was an extremely stupid and dangerous thing to do. And I found out the hard way because there was one day on that job it was me and the 2 other laborers. We were installing a giant glass panel on a wall somewhere. It was like some corporate, like some small business building, and they wanted a glass wall somewhere in the room. And we had this giant glass pane, and the foreman was like, you got to carry it. You can't carry it like this, right? Like the glass has to be vertical like this, and you have 3 people and whatever. Worked fine until we had to go down a set of stairs, and the guy at the front turned going around a corner, and it like warped to the glass just enough that it just completely shattered. And it was tempered, so it shattered into like bits and pieces that weren't sharp and dangerous. But the 2 guys, I was at the back, and the 2 guys in front of me got pretty cut up by glass falling on their heads for a half a second. which was unpleasant. They were fine. Everything was fine. But I didn't realize at that moment. But in retrospect, I'm going, that's why you wear a hard hat. Like, you don't want glass shards landing on the top of your head, or like you'd like them to bounce away from your head and neck area. But I mean, hey, it was a different time. It was 2005, 2006. This is how it was, you know. We didn't have Google Maps reviews to post about, or we didn't have internet sites to post about. Oh, my. You know, you post on TikTok about, oh, I work this job and my construction guy says I can't wear a hard hat. Isn't that crazy? And then the whole universe comes down on the guy for not making employees wear hard hats, and then they get fired and all this stuff. It was a bit of a different time. But anyway, we're going to call it. That was a long show. This was a lot of fun. Unfortunately, we didn't get to the GeoGuessr. We had a lot of questions that required brain power. Maybe we'll do something else down the road, but hope this was informative for all of you. Thank you very much for joining us. Again, for everyone who donated, like, mind-blowing. Thank you so much. Really means a lot. It helps out a lot. It'll pay for my YouTube Premium subscription for the month, because I can't stand watching ads on YouTube. And it's also much better for creators, by the way, if you pay for your YouTube rather than advertising. But nonetheless, thanks very much. This was a lot of fun. I'm going to get out of here and have a great weekend. We'll see you Monday night at 8 p.m. I believe AJ will be back. But you never know these days. You never know. But we'll see you around. Thanks for joining us, and toodles.